All right, let's just jump right in. If you're parenting a teenager today, you know it's a completely different world than the one we grew up in. And for so many parents, one of the biggest challenges is figuring out how to navigate their teen's mental health, especially when it comes to anxiety.
So this number you're seeing, it isn't just a random statistic. It's a story. According to the National Institute of Mental Health, 31.9%, that's nearly 1 in every 3 teenagers will deal with an anxiety disorder. So if you're worried about your kid, I really want you to hear this. You're not alone in this, and neither are they.
Okay, so here's our game plan. First, we're going to talk about why teen anxiety is just different. Then we'll get into the actual science, what's happening inside their brains. We'll look at the huge role screens play, what real, effective help looks like, and then we'll talk about the most important part, your role in all of this.
To really help an anxious teen, we have to get this one thing straight from the start. Their worries aren't just bigger kid worries. The whole nature of what they're afraid of has fundamentally changed. And understanding that shift, that's everything. Just look at this chart for a second. It tells such a clear story. See how fears like monsters under the bed just completely drop off? Even being scared of getting hurt goes way down. But then, look at what skyrockets. Social evaluation, worrying about what people think, and future concerns, these huge existential worries. For a teen, the monster isn't under the bed anymore. It's inside their own head.
And that's the core of it right there. This massive pivot from concrete fears to abstract ones. You know, a little kid is afraid of the dog barking right in front of them, something they can see and hear. A teenager, though, they're haunted by the what-ifs. What if I fail? What if they don't like me? What if I'm not good enough? Their anxiety lives in a future that hasn't even happened yet.
And listen, this isn't just them being dramatic. This change is literally, biologically happening inside their brains. There are real, scientific reasons why teens are so vulnerable to this kind of worry. You can think of their brain as being one big, chaotic construction zone. I absolutely love this analogy because it just nails it. The teen brain has all the horsepower in the world, the capacity for intense emotion, for big reactions, for feeling everything so deeply. That's the gas pedal, and it's floored. But the system for control, for perspective, for slowing down, yeah, those brakes are still being built. So let's look at the mechanics here. On one side, you have the amygdala. That's the gas pedal. It's the brain's threat detector, and in teens, it is wide awake and hypersensitive, especially to social judgment. On the other side, you have the prefrontal cortex. These are the brakes. This is the part that makes rational decisions. But here's the catch. It's the very last part of the brain to fully mature. So the amygdala is screaming social threat, everyone is looking at you, and the prefrontal cortex just doesn't have the strength yet to pump the brakes and say, hey, we're okay. So you take this brain that's already under construction, and you throw in maybe the single most powerful force in a teen's life, the digital world. Now, screens don't necessarily create anxiety out of thin air, but for that vulnerable teen brain, they act like a giant 24/7 magnifying glass. There's actually a term for this feeling, ambient anxiety. It's like a low-grade hum of stress that's always on in the background. It's that constant pressure of being connected, that fear of missing out, that feeling that you have to be ready to respond at any second. They never, ever get to fully switch off. And social media, specifically, is like a machine built to create an anxiety feedback loop. Every single post is a performance, waiting to be judged by likes and comments. And studies show that all that checking can literally make their brains more sensitive to what their friends think. Then you throw in how the blue light messes with their sleep and the dopamine hits that make it feel like an addiction, and you've got a perfect storm.
Okay, so it can sound pretty overwhelming, right? A vulnerable brain in this super high-pressure world. But here is the most important part of this whole conversation. The story does not end there. This is not a hopeless situation. There are proven, effective ways to help teens manage this and build resilience.
The #1 gold standard treatment for anxiety is something called cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT. Now, this isn't old-school therapy where you lie on a couch and talk about your childhood. CBT is practical, it's skill-based, it's all about giving your teen a real, hands-on toolkit to challenge the thoughts and behaviors that keep that anxiety cycle spinning. So, here's how it usually works. It starts with just understanding the why, what anxiety is, and why their brain is doing this. Then, they learn actual skills, like relaxation techniques. The real core of it is learning to spot those negative thoughts and reframe them. And finally, they gradually and in a very safe way start to face the things they're afraid of, which proves to their brain that they can handle it. And here's some really good news for modern parents. We know now that CBT delivered online can be just as effective as face-to-face therapy. For a generation that lives on their phones, getting help through an app or a video call can feel so much more comfortable, and it removes a huge barrier to just getting started. And that brings us to the final, and maybe the most crucial, piece of the puzzle. You. Now, you're not meant to be their therapist, but you are on the front lines, and knowing how to respond and how not to can make all the difference in the world. So one of your first jobs is to figure out, is this typical teenage worry, or is it something more? Is there worry about one specific thing, like a test, or is it just a constant feeling about everything? Can they put it aside and watch a movie, or is it always there? When it starts causing physical problems or makes them pull away from their life, that's your clue that it's time to get some outside help. And here are some really concrete red flags to look out for. A big mood shift right after they've been on their phone. Quitting the sports team or not seeing friends anymore. Hearing them constantly put themselves down. And a huge one, that real panic when their phone isn't around. These are all signs that things might be getting serious.
So what actually helps? Well, number one, take them seriously. Even if their fear sounds irrational to you, it feels completely real to them. Your goal should be to listen more than you advise. Be their partner in this. And maybe the most powerful thing you can do is show them what it looks like to handle stress in a healthy way. They see everything you do.
And on the flip side, it's just as important to know what doesn't help. Things like you have nothing to worry about or trying to micromanage their life. And please, try to avoid the when I was your age comparison. It just doesn't land. And telling someone with anxiety to just relax, that's like telling someone with a broken leg to just walk it off. It's not helpful, and it makes them feel totally misunderstood.
I really want to end on this thought. If you get to a point where you think your teen needs professional help, please know this. That is not a sign that you failed as a parent. It is the exact opposite. It's a sign of wisdom. It's a sign of love. It's you getting your child the right tool for the job.
So that brings us to the end. You have the information. You understand the science, the pressures, the solutions. So the only question left is, what will you do with it? How can you open the door, maybe even tonight, not to offer a bunch of solutions, but just to listen? How can you start that conversation?